The Mediterranean Sea breathes against the stone walls of Ajaccio with a rhythm that has not changed since I first drew breath on that humid August day in 1769. My mother, Letizia, often spoke of the storm that raged as I entered the world, a violent tempest that seemed to shake the very foundations of our small house on the island. I remember the scent of salt and wild herbs drifting through the open wooden door, mixing with the smoke of a dying fire that flickered against the soft ochre walls. The air was thick with the promise of chaos, yet inside the courtyard, the olive tree swayed gently in the breeze, whispering secrets to the night as the sky turned from blue to a deep violet. My father, Carlo, was a man of law who sought peace with the French authorities, but the world outside was already preparing for a different kind of order. I was the fourth child, the second to survive, born into a household that demanded discipline even as the waves lapped rhythmically against the shore. The silence of that evening was profound, untouched by the coming storms of history that would eventually carry me far from this quiet corner of Corsica. Time seemed to slow down then, offering a moment of perfect tranquility before the long march of destiny began. The light in that house held a specific weight, heavy with the dust of generations and the warmth of the southern sun. It fell across the terracotta tiles, cool to the touch even in the height of summer, creating a patchwork of shadows that shifted with the hour. A single candle sat on the rough wooden table, its flame dancing in the draught from the street, casting long, trembling shapes against the plaster. The walls smelled faintly of beeswax and old paper, a scent that suggested the passage of time and the weight of history. Outside the tall windows, the Parisian night was silent, and the only sound was the gentle ticking of a clock on the mantelpiece. The room itself was decorated in the Empire style, with chairs upholstered in deep green velvet, and legs carved to resemble lion paws. A bust of Caesar stood in the corner, its marble face serene and untroubled by the chaos of the world beyond the walls. The light from the lamp played across the smooth surface of the bust, creating a dance of shadows that moved slowly as the flame flickered. The silence of the room was profound, offering a sense of peace that contrasted with the turmoil of the political life that had once filled these halls. The map lay still, a testament to the ambitions that had been drawn upon it with such care and precision. The room felt suspended in time, a sanctuary where the past and the present merged in a quiet, contemplative harmony. The stillness of the objects within the space invited a deep sense of calm and reflection upon the events that had shaped an era. Leaving Corsica for the mainland felt like crossing an ocean of language and prejudice, for I spoke only Corsican and Italian when I arrived at the Col d'Aton before moving to the military college of Brayan. The French peers at Breen mocked my accent and my origins, isolating me within a world that demanded conformity, and mocked my difference with a quiet cruelty. Yet, it was in this solitude that the mind finds its own strength, building walls of thought that no mockery can breach. The library became a refuge where the smell of binding, glue and dry ink replaced the scent of sea salt. I traced the maps with a finger that felt too large for the paper, imagining the lines of rivers and borders as living things. The silence of the pages was a different kind of silence, one that held the voices of dead men who had walked the same paths I now walked. I learned that history is not just a record of battles, but a collection of quiet moments where decisions are made in the dark. The cold stone of the dormitory floor seeped through my thin socks, a constant reminder of the physical world that refused to yield to my dreams. Years later, the smell of turpentine and linseed oil would fill my nose in the workshops of the south of France, a scent that spoke of creation rather than destruction. The light there was different, a pale gold that seemed to hang in the air like dust motes, illuminating the faces of the olive trees. I watched the artists mix their colors, grinding pigments on stone slabs until the surface became smooth and perfect. The brushstrokes were visible in the folds of uniforms and the gold embroidery of sashes, capturing a moment of stillness that would last forever. The colors had mellowed with time, creating a soft and harmonious palette that invited contemplation. Visitors moved slowly through the galleries, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet on the floor. The light from the skylights illuminated the details of the artwork with a gentle and even glow. The landscape of the Niemen River remained as it was in the summer of 1807, flowing calmly between the banks of Russia and Prussia. The water reflected the sky in shades of blue and gray, rippling gently in the breeze. Trees lined the shore, their leaves whispering softly as the wind passed through them. The boat where the two emperors met was gone, but the memory of that meeting lingered in the quiet air. The river continued its endless journey toward the sea, indifferent to the history that unfolded upon its surface. The scene was one of profound peace and natural beauty that transcended the conflicts of the past. The legacy of these major works endured as a testament to the complexity of the Napoleonic era. The law, the art, the science, and the diplomacy all contributed to a transformation of Europe that was both profound and lasting. The influence of the civil code could still be felt in the legal systems of many countries today. The artistic masterpieces continued to inspire awe and admiration in the hearts of viewers. The scientific discoveries expanded the horizons of human knowledge and understanding. The diplomatic agreements reshaped the map of Europe and set the stage for future conflicts. The story of Napoleon Bonaparte remained a powerful narrative of ambition, achievement, and failure. Napoleon Bonaparte navigated a complex web of familial bonds that often mirrored the shifting tides of European politics. His brother Louis eventually fathered Charles. Louis, a child born into a world that had changed so much since the days of Corsica. The sun moved slowly over the quiet streets of Ajaccio, casting long shadows across the stone buildings. The warm Mediterranean air carried the scent of salt and wild herbs from the nearby hills. A small wooden door stood slightly ajar in the courtyard of the Bonaparte house, revealing a glimpse of the interior. Inside, the walls were painted a soft ochre, reflecting the golden light of the dying day. A simple wooden table sat in the center of the room, surrounded by worn chairs that had witnessed many family meals. On the table, a single candle flickered gently, casting dancing shadows against the rough plaster walls. The floor was made of terracotta tiles, cool to the touch even in the summer heat. Outside, the sound of distant waves lapping against the shore provided a rhythmic and soothing backdrop. The sky above turned from blue to a deep violet, dotted with the first stars of the evening. A lone olive tree swayed softly in the breeze, its leaves whispering secrets to the night. The atmosphere was one of profound stillness, untouched by the coming storms of history. Time seemed to slow down in this peaceful corner of Corsica, offering a moment of perfect tranquility. The silence was broken only by the occasional chirp of a cricket or the rustle of leaves. It was a scene of simple beauty that would remain etched in the memory of the young Napoleon. The siege of Toulon would later serve as a critical turning point in his military career, but it lay far in the future. The young military leader Napoleon Bonaparte played a crucial role in the siege, first taking command of the artillery. He influenced the crossing from Corsica to the mainland felt less like a journey and more like a drift into a foreign sea where the language was a wall I could not climb. I arrived at the Colgi d'Aton speaking only the rough, melodic tongue of my island home, while the other boys spoke a French that rolled off their tongues with a smoothness I could not mimic. The air in that new place tasted of damp stone and cold coal smoke, a sharp contrast to the salt and wild thyme of Ajaccio. My father had arranged this move with a hope that time and discipline would soften the edges of my difference. But the isolation felt immediate and absolute. I was the fourth child, the second to survive, and the weight of being the survivor sat heavily on a small boy's shoulders. The school was a place of strict order, where every movement was measured, and every word was scrutinized by masters who valued conformity above all else. I walked through the gray corridors with my head down, listening to the laughter of others that seemed to exclude me from the start. The French piers at Brienne mocked my accent and my origins, isolating me within a world that demanded conformity, and mocked my difference with a quiet cruelty. Yet, it was in this solitude that I found a refuge that would sustain me for the rest of my life. The library became my sanctuary, a vast room filled with the smell of old paper and the dust of centuries. I spent hours there, running my fingers over the spines of leather-bound books, feeling the texture of history beneath my touch. The stories inside those pages spoke of empires and generals, of men who shaped the world with their will, and I felt a strange kinship with them. I read about Caesar and Alexander, tracing their campaigns on maps that lay flat on the wooden tables, imagining the dust of foreign fields under my boots. The silence of the library was a deep, resonant thing, broken only by the scratching of quills and the soft turning of pages. It was a silence that accepted me, unlike the noisy hallways where my accent marked me as an outsider. I learned to observe the world with a sharp eye, watching the way the light fell through the high windows, and how the shadows lengthened as the afternoon wore on. The other boys played games of war in the courtyard, shouting and running with a reckless energy that I did not share. I preferred to stand apart, watching them with a quiet intensity, analyzing their movements and their hierarchies. There was a coldness in the air of the Netherlands countryside where I later studied, a damp chill that seemed to seep into the bones. The sky was often a uniform gray, hanging low over the flat lands and the winding rivers that cut through the earth. I remember the smell of the damp wool of my uniform, a heavy fabric that never seemed to dry completely in that climate. The wind howled through the bare branches of the trees that lined the paths, a constant sound that filled the spaces between my thoughts. I walked alone through the mud, my boots sinking slightly with each step, feeling the resistance of the earth against my feet. The strict Dutch Reformed household of my father Theodorus, though I was not living with him, cast a long shadow over my early years of memory. The values of that faith were rigid, demanding a purity of heart and a discipline of the body that left little room for error. I felt the weight of these expectations even from a distance, a sense that I was constantly being measured against an invisible standard. The isolation was not just physical but emotional, a barrier that separated me from the warmth of family and the ease of belonging. I learned to rely on my own mind, to find answers within myself when the world offered no guidance. The books became my companions, their voices filling the silence of my days with stories of great men and great deeds. I read about the fall of Rome and the rise of new nations, tracing the cycles of history with a fascination that bordered on obsession. The ink on the pages was dark and permanent, a testament to the power of words to shape reality. I would trace the lines of text with my finger, feeling the slight indentation of the paper, a tactile connection to the thoughts of others. The library was a place of stillness, where time seemed to lose its meaning, and I could lose myself in the worlds created by authors long dead. I remember the sound of a clock ticking in the corner, a slow, steady rhythm that marked the passage of hours without urgency. The dust motes danced in the shafts of light that pierced the gloom, swirling in patterns that seemed to have no purpose other than to exist. It was a quiet beauty, one that required patience to appreciate, a lesson I learned early in those long days of solitude. The cold of the Netherlands countryside settled into the stones of the buildings and the marrow of my bones, creating a landscape that felt both vast and confining. The sky was a heavy blanket of gray, unbroken by the sun for days at a time, casting the world in a monochrome of muted tones. I walked the paths between the dunes and the rivers, watching the water move with a slow, deliberate grace that contrasted with the frantic energy of my own thoughts. The reeds along the banks whispered in the wind, a soft, rustling sound that seemed to speak a language of its own. The air smelled of wet earth and decaying leaves, a scent that was rich and complex, grounding me in the present moment. I would sit for hours on a stone bench, watching the clouds drift across the sky, their shapes changing with a slow, hypnotic rhythm. The silence of the countryside was profound, broken only by the distant cry of a bird or the creak of a windmill turning in the breeze. It was a silence that demanded attention, forcing me to listen to the subtle sounds of the natural world. The light was diffused, soft and even, eliminating the harsh shadows that defined the world of the South. Everything seemed to blend together in a haze of gray and green, a landscape that felt timeless and unchanging. I felt a strange sense of peace in this stillness, a feeling that the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The isolation of these walks allowed me to think without distraction, to sort through the chaos of my own mind. I would walk until my legs ached, feeling the burn in my muscles, a physical sensation that grounded me in reality. The mud was thick and cold, sticking to my boots with a tenacious grip that mirrored the hold of my own thoughts. I remember the feeling of the wind against my face, a sharp, biting cold that cleared the mind of all but the most immediate concerns. The landscape was a mirror of my inner state, vast and empty, yet filled with a quiet intensity. I felt small in the face of such a large world, a tiny figure moving through a landscape that had existed long before me and would exist long after. The rivers flowed endlessly toward the sea, indifferent to the struggles of the men who lived on their banks. The trees stood like sentinels, their bare branches reaching up to the sky, a silent plea for warmth and light. The world was a place of contrasts, of cold and warmth, of silence and sound, of isolation and connection. I learned to navigate these contrasts, to find balance in the midst of chaos. The solitude was not a punishment, but a gift, a space where I could become who I was meant to be. It was in these quiet moments, away from the noise of the world, that I found my own voice. The books I read were not just stories but maps, guiding me through the labyrinth of my own potential. I saw myself in the characters I admired, men who had risen from nothing to shape the fate of nations. Their struggles were my struggles, their triumphs my aspirations. I felt a fire burning inside me, a desire to leave a mark on the world that would not fade. The cold could not extinguish this fire. The isolation could not dampen this hope. I walked with a purpose, my steps firm and deliberate, moving forward into a future that was unwritten. The landscape of the Netherlands, with its flat horizons and endless skies, seemed to offer a canvas for my dreams. I imagined myself as a painter, filling the gray expanse with color and life, creating a world that reflected the intensity of my own spirit. The wind carried my thoughts, scattering them across the fields and the rivers, where they would take root and grow. It was a time of formation, of shaping the clay of my character under the pressure of circumstance. The strictness of the school, the coldness of the climate, the isolation of my position, all served to forge a will that would not break. I learned to endure, to persist, to keep moving forward even when the path was obscured by mist. The silence of the countryside was a teacher, instructing me in the art of patience and observation. I learned to see the world, not as it appeared on the surface, but as it was beneath, full of hidden depths and secret meanings. The reeds, the rivers, the clouds, the wind, all had stories to tell, if one knew how to listen. I listened, and I learned, and I grew. The memory of the boat where two emperors once met on the Niemen River lingers in the quiet air, a symbol of a time when power was shared in a fragile alliance. The water reflects the sky in shades of blue and gray, rippling gently in the breeze, indifferent to the history that unfolded upon its surface. Trees line the shore, their leaves whispering softly as the wind passes through them, creating a soundscape of natural peace that transcends the conflicts of the past. The boat where the two emperors met is gone, but the memory of that meeting lingers in the quiet air, a testament to the complexity of the Napoleonic era. The landscape of the Niemen River remains as it was in the summer of 1807, flowing calmly between the banks of Russia and Prussia. The law, the art, the science, and the diplomacy all contributed to a transformation of Europe that was both profound and lasting. The influence of the civil code can still be felt in the legal systems of many countries today, a legacy of order that outlasted the chaos of war. The artistic masterpieces continue to inspire awe and admiration in the hearts of viewers, their beauty enduring through the centuries. The scientific discoveries expanded the horizons of human knowledge and understanding, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The diplomatic agreements reshaped the map of Europe and set the stage for future conflicts, a complex web of alliances and enmities. The story of Napoleon Bonaparte remains a powerful narrative of ambition, achievement, and failure, a tale that resonates across time. The quiet study where I often wrote my memoirs on St. Helena held a simple wooden desk, its surface worn smooth by years of use. The faint scratches of my quill marked the wood, a record of the words that poured from my mind in the stillness of the night. A single oil lamp cast a warm, flickering glow across the scattered papers and maps, illuminating the details of my past. The air smelled faintly of old parchment and the salt from the nearby ocean, a scent that brought memories of distant lands. Outside the small window, the vast Atlantic stretched endlessly under a pale moon, a silent witness to my exile. The silence of the room was broken only by the distant cry of a seabird, a lonely sound that echoed the solitude of my condition. This humble space held the weight of an empire that once spanned continents, a paradox of power and powerlessness. The stillness of the evening offered a moment of peace for the weary former emperor, a respite from the storms of memory. I sat alone with my thoughts, surrounded by the quiet dignity of my exile, finding a strange comfort in the simplicity of my surroundings. The room seemed to hold the echoes of my past conversations and grand ambitions, the voices of those who had been with me in triumph and defeat. The soft light illuminated the dust, motes dancing slowly in the still air, a visual representation of the passage of time. It was a place of reflection where the noise of war had finally faded away, leaving only the sound of the map of Europe was a living thing that breathed and shifted with the seasons, its borders drawn in blood and erased by the next tide of battle. I watched as old kingdoms crumbled into dust, while new empires rose from the ashes of revolution, each claiming to bring order to a world that had forgotten how to stand still. The air in the council chambers often smelled of stale tobacco and unwashed wool, heavy with the weight of decisions that would send thousands to their graves before the sun set. I learned early that a line on a parchment could move armies as surely as a shouted command, and that the ink used to sign treaties was often mixed with the tears of the defeated. The chaos of those days was a constant hum in the background of every thought, a vibration that traveled through the floorboards and up into the soles of my boots. Men spoke of liberty and equality with fire in their eyes, yet they built new cages with the very bars they had once broken. I walked through the streets of Paris, when the guillotine still stood in the square, the stone steps worn smooth by the feet of those who came to watch the blade fall. The smell of iron and wet stone lingered in the air long after the crowds had dispersed, a reminder that freedom often tasted of salt and rust. My own hands, once meant to hold a plow or a scholar's pen, grew calloused from the hilt of sword and the grip of arenes. I saw the faces of men change from hope to despair in the span of a single campaign, their eyes losing their light as the winter winds blew through the Russian steppe. The history books would later call this an era of transformation, but I remember it as a time of constant motion, where stability was a myth and survival was the only truth. The legal systems of a dozen nations were rewritten in the space of a few years, the old laws of kings and priests replaced by codes written in a new language of reason and order. I walked through the libraries of conquered cities, running my fingers over the spines of books that had gathered dust for centuries, feeling the vibration of ideas that had once been forbidden. The world was being unmade and remade before my eyes, a grand tapestry being pulled apart and woven again with threads of conflict and diplomacy. It was a time when the ancient past and the modern present collided with a violence that shook the foundations of society, forcing everyone to choose a side or be swept away. The desire to understand the old ways persisted even as the new order took hold, creating a strange tension between the reverence for history and the hunger for the future. This friction sparked a fire that burned through the continent, illuminating the dark corners of ignorance and fear with the light of new knowledge. The pursuit of order became an obsession, a driving force that pushed men to march across mountains and seas in search of a peace that always seemed just out of reach. A quiet stone rests in a dimly lit museum hall, its surface worn smooth by centuries of handling and time. This black basalt slab, known as the Rosetta Stone, was discovered by a French soldier in 1799 during the occupation of Egypt. The stone contained fragments of passages written in ancient Greek, Egyptian hieroglyphics, and Egyptian demotic. The section in Greek revealed that the three scripts shared the same content, which provided the key to understanding the lost language. The Rosetta Stone is a fragment of a larger stele, and none of the three texts on it is complete. French Egyptologist Jean Francois Champollion was able to crack the code and decipher the hieroglyphics in 1822. This discovery unlocked a language the knowledge of which had disappeared after the end of the 4th century AD. The stone sits silently now, a testament to the scholarly curiosity that flourished even amidst the turmoil of war. Its presence reminds observers that the pursuit of knowledge often persists regardless of the political upheavals surrounding it. The political environment of Europe during this era was defined by a series of conflicts known as the Napoleonic Wars, which dominated the continent in the early 19th century. These wars were a continuation of the struggles that began with the French Revolution, as European monarchies sought to contain the spread of revolutionary ideals. The Treaty of Tilsit was signed in 1807 between Russia and France, representing a minor slowing of the flow of the wars that dominated Europe. This treaty temporarily aligned two former enemies, creating a brief period of peace that allowed for diplomatic reorganization across the region. Despite such agreements, the underlying tensions remained, and the balance of power shifted frequently as nations formed and dissolved alliances. The era was characterized by a constant state of flux, where borders changed and governments rose and fell, with the tides of military victory and defeat. My influence extended far beyond the borders of France, reshaping the legal and administrative systems of many conquered territories. My reforms, including the Napoleonic Code, left a lasting legacy that outlasted my own reign and the empires I built. The historical record shows that while my military campaigns were often brutal, my administrative changes brought a degree of order to regions previously plagued by feudal chaos. The period was one of intense transformation, where old traditions clashed with new ideas of governance and citizenship. Scholars continue to study this complex time to understand how one man could alter the course of history so profoundly. The narrative of this era is not merely one of battles, but also of the profound social and intellectual shifts that accompanied them. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone during the Egyptian campaign serves as a poignant reminder of the intellectual pursuits that occurred alongside the military conquests. It illustrates how the desire to understand the past persisted even as the present was being violently rewritten. The stone itself, with its 3 scripts, symbolizes the bridging of worlds, connecting the ancient past with the modern present through the power of decipherment. This connection between the ancient and the modern was a defining feature of the age, as Europe looked back to Rome and Greece for inspiration while forging a new path forward. The political landscape was thus a tapestry woven from threads of conflict, diplomacy, and the enduring human quest for knowledge and order. The personal life I lived was a complex tapestry of public ambition and private affection, woven from moments of intense joy and deep sorrow. I ruled as Emperor of the French from 1804 until my final abdication in 1814 or 1815, a title that felt both like a crown of gold and a chain of iron. Although I took several mistresses during these years, I declared that my true mistress was power itself, a cold and demanding lover that never slept. I wrote in 1804 that my romantic attachments did not engage my deepest feelings or my primary focus, yet the words felt hollow even as I wrote them. Despite this statement, I continued to love my wife José fine with a profound and enduring devotion that defied all logic and reason. This duality defined my character as I navigated the turbulent waters of history, balancing the needs of an empire with the desires of a lonely heart. The streets of Paris were alive with the sound of carriages and the murmur of crowds, but inside the palace, the silence was often heavy with unspoken words. I would walk the long corridors at night, the candlelight casting long shadows on the walls, thinking of the battles fought and the lives lost. The weight of the crown was a physical thing, pressing down on my head with a pressure that never ceased. I saw the faces of my generals and ministers, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and admiration, and I knew that their loyalty was bought with the promise of glory. The world outside was a storm of change, but within the walls of my residence, I tried to create a sense of permanence and order. The gardens were tended with care, the flowers blooming in perfect rows, a small island of beauty in a sea of chaos. I would sit by the window and watch the rain fall on the cobblestones, listening to the rhythm of the drops as they struck the stone. The sound was a reminder of the passage of time, of the days and years that slipped away like water through a clenched fist. My legacy would be written in the laws and the maps, but my heart would remain in the quiet moments of reflection and the memories of a love that could never be fully satisfied. The history of my life is a story of rise and fall, of ambition and loss, of a man who tried to shape the world and was shaped by it in return. The debates over my character and actions continued to engage intellectuals and the public alike, my image shifting from that of a monster to a tragic hero and back again. This fluctuation reflected the changing political climates of the nations that remembered me, a testament to the power of memory and the fluidity of history. The Napoleonic legend became a powerful tool for political movements in the 19th century, leaders invoking my name to justify their own ambitions and reforms. My life story provided a narrative of rise and fall that resonated with many people, a tale of extraordinary achievement and profound loss. The modern significance of my reign lies in the lasting impact of my policies on contemporary society, the legal principles I established continuing to guide judicial systems in many parts of the world. My administrative reforms created efficient bureaucracies that outlasted my empire by centuries. The concept of meritocracy in government, and the military championed by my rule. These ideas challenged the traditional hierarchies based on birth, and the crown felt heavier than any sword I ever lifted, a cold weight of gold and velvet pressing against the brow until the skin learned to bear the burden. I walked through the Tuileries with a stride that had once belonged to a boy from Corsica. Yet the stone floors echoed with the footsteps of 1,000 ghosts who came before me. The air in the great halls smelled of beeswax and old paper, a scent that clung to the drapes and the polished tables where ministers whispered of war and peace. I remember the morning light filtering through the high windows, catching the dust motes that danced in the silence before the court woke to demand attention. My hands, once stained with the mud of Austerlitz, now held quills that signed laws to bind a continent. The ink was dark and permanent, flowing from a pen that felt like an extension of my own will. I saw the faces of the people in the streets, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope, as they watched the empire rise from the ashes of revolution. They wanted order, and I gave them a system that would outlast the fleeting passions of the mob. The Napoleonic Code became the bedrock of civil life, replacing the fragmented feudal laws of the old regime with a unified and rational structure that governed millions. It was a simple thing in its logic, yet profound in its reach, declaring that all men stood equal before the law regardless of their birth or station. This principle of equality before the law for citizens across many nations replaced the arbitrary judgments of kings and priests with a clear and written standard. The code remained a cornerstone of civil law in many jurisdictions long after the empire had crumbled into history books. The light in the study shifted slowly as the afternoon wore on, casting long shadows across the maps that covered every available surface. I traced the borders of nations with a finger that had once pointed the way to victory, watching the ink dry on treaties that redrew the face of Europe. The wood of the desk was smooth under my palm, worn by the touch of many hands that had sought to understand the world I was building. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees of the garden, carrying the scent of rain that promised to wash away the dust of the city. I thought of the brothers and sisters who shared my blood, their names echoing through the generations as they carried the surname into quiet corners of the world. The Bonaparte family name continued through descendants of Lucien, Louis, and Jeremy into the 21st century, maintaining a connection to their illustrious ancestor through generations of change. They lived quietly in various European countries, carrying a surname that still evoked images of imperial grandeur without the burden of command. The political power of the family faded, but their historical presence remained a subject of interest for those who studied the past. Historians and genealogists continued to trace their lineage with careful attention to detail, piecing together the lives of those who came after. The memory of the emperor lived on in the stories told by these distant relatives who preserved artifacts and documents that offered glimpses into the life of the great leader. The family name became a symbol of a specific era in European history, representing both the glory of conquest and the tragedy of exile. A large portrait of the emperor hangs on the wall, his gaze fixed on a point beyond the viewer. The brushstrokes are visible in the folds of his uniform and the gold embroidery of his sash. The colors have mellowed with time, creating a soft and harmonious palette that invites contemplation. Visitors move slowly through the galleries, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet on the floor. The light from the skylights illuminates the details of the artwork with a gentle and even glow. The landscape of the Niemen River remains as it was in the summer of 1807, flowing calmly between the banks of Russia and Prussia. The water reflects the sky in shades of blue and gray, rippling gently in the breeze. Trees line the shore, their leaves whispering softly as the wind passes through them. The boat where the two emperors met is gone, but the memory of that meeting lingers in the quiet air. The river continues its endless journey toward the sea, indifferent to the history that unfolded upon its surface. The scene is one of profound peace and natural beauty that transcends the conflicts of the past. The legacy of these major works endures as a testament to the complexity of the Napoleonic era. The law, the art, the science, and the diplomacy all contributed to a transformation of Europe that was both profound and lasting. The influence of the civil code can still be felt in the legal systems of many countries today. The artistic masterpieces continue to inspire awe and admiration in the hearts of viewers. The scientific discoveries expanded the horizons of human knowledge and understanding. The diplomatic agreements reshaped the map of Europe and set the stage for future conflicts. The story of Napoleon Bonaparte remains a powerful narrative of ambition, achievement, and failure. The critical reception of my character evolved significantly over the decades following the final silence of my breath. Early accounts often portrayed me as a tyrant who sought absolute power at any cost, painting a picture of a monster driven by greed. Later, historians began to emphasize the role of a modernizer who brought order to chaos, finding logic in the madness of war. Some scholars argued that military genius was matched by administrative brilliance, seeing the code as a gift to the future. Others focused on the human cost of endless campaigns across the continent, counting the dead in the fields of Europe. The debate over my character and actions continued to engage intellectuals and the public alike for centuries. My image shifted from that of a monster to a tragic hero and back again, reflecting the changing political climates of the nations that remembered me. The Napoleonic legend grew in the telling, becoming a myth that obscured the man beneath the crown. I watched from the silence as the stories changed, twisting my life into shapes that suited the needs of the present. The truth was neither a monster nor a god, but a man who tried to hold back the tide of time with a system of laws and a map of the world. The years passed, and the house became a place of pilgrimage for those who sought to understand the final days of the exile. The legacy of laws and wars remained, but the man himself was gone, lost to the mist and the sea. The silence of the room was a testament to the finality of death and the passage of time. The candle burned down to a small pool of wax, marking the end of another long day on the island. The night fell slowly, wrapping the house in a blanket of darkness and stillness. The stars appeared above, indifferent to the history that had unfolded on the earth below. The island slept, and the memory of the emperor rested within its quiet, rocky heart. Time seemed to have stopped in the small study, where the books lay, open to pages that spoke of laws governing millions of lives across generations. The text on the page spoke of laws that had governed millions of lives across generations. The ink was dark and clear, preserving the words of a man who had once commanded armies. A single feather pen lay beside the book, ready for a scholar to make notes. The silence of the room honored the weight of history contained within the small volume. The legacy of Napoleon Bonaparte remains a subject of enduring fascination for historians and the general public. His life story serves as a reminder of the power of human ambition and the limits of control. The reforms he implemented continue to shape the legal and social structures of many nations. His name is still spoken with a mixture of awe and caution in classrooms and courtrooms. The world he created was different from the one he left, yet it bore his imprint deeply. The study of his life offers valuable lessons about leadership, war, and the nature of power. His story is one of extraordinary achievement and profound loss. It is a narrative that continues to inspire and provoke thought in the modern world. The impact of his actions rippled through time, touching lives he never knew. The memory of his reign endures as a testament to a transformative period in human history. The smell of old paper and leather bindings fills the air with a scent of permanence and stillness. The grand halls of the museums display the paintings and artifacts that tell the story of an empire that rose and fell. A large portrait of the emperor hangs on the wall, his gaze fixed on a point beyond the viewer. The brushstrokes are visible in the folds of his uniform and the gold embroidery of his sash. The colors have mellowed with time, creating a soft and harmonious palette that invites contemplation. Visitors move slowly through the galleries, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet on the floor. The light from the skylights illuminates the details of the artwork with a gentle and even glow. The landscape of the Niemen River remains as it was in the summer of 1807, flowing calmly between the banks of Russia and Prussia. The water reflects the sky in shades of blue and gray, rippling gently in the breeze. Trees line the shore, their leaves whispering softly as the wind passes through them. The boat where the two emperors met is gone, but the memory of that meeting lingers in the quiet air. The river continues its endless journey toward the sea, indifferent to the history that unfolded upon its surface. The scene is one of profound peace and natural beauty that the borders of the map shifted, like sand dunes before a relentless wind, changing with every victory and every defeat that marked those turbulent years. I watched as old kingdoms crumbled and new governments rose from the ashes of revolution, all while the tides of war washed over the continent. My influence stretched far beyond the shores of France, reshaping the legal stones and administrative foundations of territories I had conquered with the sword. The Napoleonic Code became a lasting legacy that outlived my reign and the empires I built, bringing order to regions once plagued by feudal chaos. While the military campaigns were often brutal and bloody, the administrative changes I introduced brought a degree of stability to lands that had known only confusion. This period was one of intense transformation, where ancient traditions clashed with new ideas of governance and citizenship in a violent but necessary dance. Scholars continue to study this complex time to understand how one man could alter the course of history so profoundly with a single stroke of a pen. The narrative of this era is not merely one of battles fought on muddy fields, but also of the profound social and intellectual shifts that accompanied them. The quiet study in the Tuileries Palace held a large map of Europe spread across the oak table, its surface worn by the touch of many hands. A single oil lamp cast a warm, golden glow upon the parchment, illuminating the intricate lines of borders and rivers with a soft, steady light. The air smelled faintly of old paper and beeswax, a scent that suggested the passage of time and the weight of history. Outside the tall windows, the Parisian night was silent, and the only sound was the gentle ticking of a clock on the mantelpiece. The room itself was decorated in the Empire style, with straight lines and classical motifs that reflected a desire for structure and clarity. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone during the Egyptian campaign serves as a poignant reminder of the intellectual pursuits that occurred alongside the military conquests. It illustrates how the desire to understand the past persisted even as the present was being violently rewritten by the march of armies. The stone itself, with its 3 distinct scripts, symbolizes the bridging of worlds, connecting the ancient past with the modern present through the power of decipherment. This connection between the ancient and the modern was a defining feature of the age, as Europe looked back to Rome and Greece for inspiration while forging a new path forward. The political landscape was thus a tapestry woven from threads of conflict, diplomacy, and the enduring human quest for knowledge and order. My personal life maintained a complex balance between public ambition and private affection throughout the long years of rule. I declared that my true mistress was power itself, for the romantic attachments I made did not engage my deepest feelings or my primary focus. Despite this statement, I continued to love my wife Josephine with a profound and enduring devotion that survived the political storms. This duality defined my character as I navigated the turbulent waters of the court and the battlefield with equal care. The Second Empire, led by Charles Louis, later sought to emulate the glory and reforms of the First, while adapting to the changed political landscape of a new century. The continuity of the name ensured that the myth remained a potent force in French politics for decades after the initial collapse. He ruled for nearly 2 decades before the regime fell following the Franco-Prussian War. Yet the shadow of the first emperor remained long. The reception of my works varied widely across Europe and depended heavily on local political contexts and the needs of the people. In France, I was celebrated as a savior who brought order after years of revolutionary chaos and terror that had shaken the nation to its core. My reforms modernized the administration and created a meritocratic system that rewarded talent over birth, allowing men of humble origins to rise. However, in conquered territories, my rule was often viewed as foreign domination and exploitation that stifled local traditions and aspirations. The continental system aimed to weaken Britain economically, but caused widespread hardship for merchants and consumers alike across the continent. Many nations eventually united against me as my ambitions grew to encompass the entire land, forcing a coalition of enemies to form. The architectural legacy of the period includes the Arc de Triomphe and the Vendéme column, which still dominate the Parisian skyline today. These monuments were designed to commemorate military victories and honor the soldiers who fought for the empire with their lives and blood. The construction of the Arc de Triomphe began in 1806, but was not completed until long after my death in exile on the island. It stood as a testament to the grandeur of the vision and the immense power of the state that I had built. The column itself was cast from bronze cannons captured during the War of the Third Coalition, melted down to form a monument to peace through strength. It served as a permanent reminder of the military successes that defined the early career and the rise to power. My correspondence also constitutes a major work in its own right and offers insight into the daily life and decision-making process. I wrote thousands of letters to generals, ministers, and family members with remarkable speed and clarity, often late into the night. These documents reveal a mind constantly engaged in the minutiae of governance and strategy, never leaving a detail to chance. They show a leader who believed in direct control and personal oversight of every aspect of the empire, from the price of bread to the movement of troops. The collection of letters provides an unparalleled view of the mind at work, demonstrating the capacity for both great vision and petty detail in equal measure. The cultural impact of the era extended to literature and the visual arts, shaping the identity of a unified and powerful France. I found comfort in the orderly arrangements of nature that mirrored my own desire for control over the chaotic world. The gardens at Malmaison reflected my preference for structured layouts, and exotic plantings that demonstrated the imperial reach and power. I did not seek to capture the fleeting beauty of a sunset, but rather the enduring strength of a fortress that could withstand any siege. This pragmatic approach to the visual world defined my relationship with art throughout the life and the reign. I remained a consumer of culture who understood its potential to inspire loyalty and awe among the populace who looked to me for guidance. The legacy in the arts is found in the monuments and paintings that celebrated the achievements rather than in any personal creative output. The artistic development was shaped by the vision of a unified and powerful France that required a cohesive visual identity. Artists worked within the framework established to create a style characterized by its clarity, its grandeur, and its unwavering focus on the figure of the emperor. This period marked a significant moment in the history of art where political power directly dictated aesthetic trends across the continent. The influence of taste extended beyond France to the courts of Europe that were conquered or allied through marriage and treaty. The spread of the empire style across the continent demonstrated the reach of cultural ambition and the desire for order. Even in exile, I continued to reflect on the images that had defined the reign and the public persona. The memory of these visual representations remained vivid in the minds of those who served and followed. The artistic record serves as a testament to the power of image, making, in the modern age, and the lasting impact of a single will. A single feather pen lay beside the book, ready for a scholar to make notes on the laws that had governed millions. The text on the page spoke of laws that had governed millions of lives across generations with a clarity that endured. The ink was dark and clear, preserving the words of a man who had once commanded armies and redrew the map of Europe. The silence of the room honored the weight of history contained within the small volume of the code. The legacy remains a subject of enduring fascination for historians and the general public who seek to understand the man. The life story serves as a reminder of the power of human ambition and the limits of control over the forces of nature and history. The reforms implemented continue to shape the legal and social structures of many nations to this very day. The name is still spoken with a mixture of awe and caution in classrooms and courtrooms around the world. The world created was different from the one left, yet it bore the imprint deeply and permanently. The study of the life offers valuable lessons about leadership, war, and the nature of power in the hands of one man. The story is one of extraordinary achievement and profound loss that cannot be separated from the other. It is a narrative that continues to inspire and provoke thought in the modern world and the future. The impact of the actions rippled through time, touching lives never known by the man who started it all. The memory of the reign endures as a testament to a transformative period in human history that changed everything. The wind on St. Helena does not carry the scent of salt from a nearby sea, for the ocean lies 2,000 miles away, hidden behind a curtain of perpetual cloud. I watched the mist cling to the basalt cliffs, a white shroud that moved with the slow, indifferent patience of a creature that does not know it is watching. The house stood alone on the plateau, a stone shell where the air grew heavy with the weight of days that no longer held any purpose. Inside, the dust settled on the furniture in soft, gray layers, catching the pale light that filtered through the cracked shutters. That light was gentle but cold, illuminating the scratches on the wooden table where my hand had rested so many times before. The silence was not empty. It was filled with the memory of commands given, of maps unrolled, of the scratch of a pen against paper as laws were written for millions. Now, only the sound of the wind whistling through the stone cracks remained, a constant reminder of the isolation that had become my only companion. The ocean continued its eternal rhythm far below, rising and falling with a patience that mocked the ambition of men who tried to conquer the earth. I walked through the room slowly, feeling the cool air against my skin, knowing that the history contained within these four walls would outlast the man who once filled them. The memory of the emperor faded slowly, like the last light of day disappearing behind the western hills, leaving only the rock and the sea to hold the secret of a life that had burned with such intensity. The years passed, and the house became a place of pilgrimage for those who sought to understand the final days. Yet the man himself was gone, lost to the mist and the deep blue of the Atlantic. The silence of the room was a testament to the finality of death and the passage of time, a quiet that no amount of shouting could ever break. A single candle burned on the desk, its flame flickering in the draught that seeped through the old timber frames. The wax pooled slowly around the base, marking the end of another long day on this remote island where time seemed to have stopped. I watched the wick char and blacken, knowing that soon the light would vanish, leaving only the darkness and the sound of the wind. The night fell slowly, wrapping the house in a blanket of stillness that felt heavier than any armor I had ever worn. The stars appeared above, indifferent to the history that had unfolded on the earth below, their cold light shining on a world that had moved on without me. The island slept, and the memory of the emperor rested within its quiet, rocky heart, waiting for a dawn that would never bring the same warmth as before. The legacy of laws and wars remained, but the man who had forged them was gone, reduced to a whisper in the wind that blew across the desolate landscape. The text on the page spoke of laws that had governed millions of lives across generations, written in ink that was dark and clear. A single feather pen lay beside the book, ready for a scholar to make notes, yet the hand that had once held it with such authority was now still. The silence of the room honored the weight of history contained within the small volume, a silence that demanded respect for the past. The reforms implemented during those years continued to shape the legal and social structures of many nations, even as the world moved forward into a new age. My name was still spoken with a mixture of awe and caution in classrooms and courtrooms, a name that carried the weight of both glory and failure. The world created was different from the one left behind, yet it bore the imprint deeply, like a scar that never fully heals. The study of this life offered lessons about leadership, war, and the nature of power. Lessons that were hard to learn and harder to forget. The story was one of extraordinary achievement and profound loss, a narrative that continued to inspire and provoke thought in the modern world. The impact of actions rippled through time, touching lives that were never known, creating a legacy that endured long after the final breath had been drawn. The memory of the rain remained as a testament to a transformative period in human history, a time when the course of nations was altered by the will of one man. The political landscape of the era was characterized by a constant state of flux, where borders changed and governments rose and fell with the tides of military victory and defeat. The influence extended far beyond the borders of France, reshaping the legal and administrative systems of many conquered territories with a speed that amazed the world. The reforms, including the code that bore my name, left a lasting legacy that outlasted the rain and the empires built with blood and iron. The historical record showed that while the military campaigns were often brutal, the administrative changes brought a degree of order to regions previously plagued by feudal chaos. The period was one of intense transformation, where old traditions clashed with new ideas of governance and citizenship, creating a friction that sparked change across the continent. Scholars continued to study this complex time to understand how one man could alter the course of history so profoundly, searching for the seeds of the modern world in the soil of the past. The narrative of this era was not merely one of battles, but also of the profound social and intellectual shifts that accompanied them, changes that would define the future. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone during the Egyptian campaign served as a poignant reminder of the intellectual pursuits that occurred alongside the military conquests. The stone itself, with its 3 scripts, symbolized the bridging of worlds, connecting the ancient past with the modern present through the power of decipherment. This connection between the ancient and the modern was a defining feature of the age. As Europe looked back to Rome and Greece for inspiration while forging a new path forward, the political landscape was thus a tapestry woven from threads of conflict, diplomacy, and the enduring human quest for knowledge and order, a pattern that repeated itself in every generation. On the international stage, the interactions with other monarchs were often theatrical and highly symbolic, designed to project power and authority. The meeting with Alexander I of Russia on a boat in the Niemen River to negotiate a critical treaty was frequently depicted as a romantic convergence of the East and the West. Yet the theatrical air of these encounters often masked deep underlying tensions between the 2 empires, tensions that would eventually lead to war. These diplomatic maneuvers defined the balance of power in Europe for nearly 2 decades, a time when the fate of nations hung in the balance of a single conversation. The relationship with the British government deteriorated rapidly after the final defeat at Waterloo, leaving no room for compromise or negotiation. During the exile on St. Helena, the rigid authority of Governor Hudson Lowe became the focus of daily friction and resentment. Lowe first addressed me as Napoleon Bonaparte rather than acknowledging the title of emperor or general, a deliberate slight that caused significant pain. The governor served as the de facto gaoler during the final years of isolation, enforcing a strict protocol that felt like a personal insult. The deportations of confidence for writing letters about the severity of the treatment highlighted the complex nature of the adversarial relationship. Despite the harsh treatment, the governor recommended that the British government increase the allowance to the household, a paradoxical behavior that revealed the confusion of those who held the keys. The instructions from London dictated a strict protocol that was deeply insulting, yet the circle of collaborators, including scholars and soldiers who had accompanied the Egyptian campaign, remained a source of strength. A French soldier had discovered the Rosetta Stone in 1799 during that occupation, finding a piece of history that would unlock the secrets of the ancient world. The stone contained inscriptions in 3 scripts allowing future scholars. The Atlantic wind carried a salt that tasted different here, sharper and colder than the Mediterranean air of my youth. I walked the gravel paths of Longwood House, watching the clouds gather over the southern horizon with a heavy, gray weight. The island was a prison of rock and sea, a place where time seemed to stretch and thin until it became almost invisible. My footsteps crunched on the loose stones, a sound that echoed too loudly in the vast silence of this desolate world. The governor, Hudson Lowe, moved through the corridors with a rigid posture, his eyes fixed on the rules rather than the man he guarded. He refused to call me emperor, insisting on the name Bonaparte as if it were a brand rather than a history. This small slight created a wall between us that no amount of diplomacy could ever breach. I watched him from the window, a figure in a dark coat pacing the garden with the precision of a clockwork toy. The tension in the air was thick, heavy with unspoken words and the weight of a lost empire. My companions, the few who remained loyal, whispered in corners, their voices low and filled with a quiet desperation. We spoke of the past, of the laws that once governed millions, and of the maps that once stretched from Spain to Russia. Yet the present was a small room with peeling paint and a view of the endless, churning ocean. The rain fell often here, a relentless drumming on the roof that never ceased, washing away the dust of the world outside. It was a gentle rain, indifferent to the history contained within these four crumbling walls. The light filtered through the heavy curtains, casting long, pale shadows that danced across the floorboards. I sat in the chair, my hands resting on the arms, feeling the rough wood beneath my skin. The memory of the Rosetta Stone, found in the sands of Egypt, surfaced in my mind like a dream. That black basalt slab, with its 3 distinct scripts, had bridged the gap between the ancient past and the modern world. A French soldier discovered it in 1799 while digging foundations, unaware of the intellectual treasure he held. The stone stood as a testament to the curiosity that had accompanied my armies, a reminder that even in war, the mind seeks to understand. It was a bridge between worlds, connecting the forgotten language of the pharaohs with the scholars of Europe. I thought of how I had brought scholars to document the lands I conquered, seeking to be seen as a bringer of civilization rather than a destroyer. The legacy of those men and the artifacts they found outlasted the battles and the treaties that defined my life. The island remained steadfast and unchanging, holding the secret of a man who had tried to conquer the globe. The years passed slowly, marked only by the changing seasons and the arrival of supplies from London. My nephew, the young Charles Louis, would one day rule again, continuing the imperial tradition in a world that had moved on. The annulment of my marriage to Josephine still ached in the chest, a quiet sorrow that never fully faded. She was my true mistress, not power, though I had often claimed otherwise to the world. The duality of my life, the public ambition and the private affection, had defined every step of the long journey. Now, in this remote corner of the earth, the public ambition had dissolved into the mist. Only the private memories remained, clear and sharp against the gray backdrop of the island. The wind whispered through the cracks in the stone, carrying stories of the past into the present. The house stood as a silent monument to a life that had burned with such intensity and ended so quietly. The memory of the emperor faded slowly, like the last light of day disappearing behind the western hills. The ocean continued its eternal rhythm, rising and falling with a patience that mocked human ambition. The candle burned down to a small pool of wax, marking the end of another long day on the island. The night fell slowly, wrapping the house in a blanket of darkness and stillness. The stars appeared above, indifferent to the history that had unfolded on the earth below. The island slept, and the memory of the emperor rested within its quiet, rocky heart. The silence of the room was a testament to the finality of death and the passage of time. The light touched the windows, illuminating the dust that settled on every surface. It was a gentle, indifferent light that cared nothing for the history contained within those four walls. The ocean continued its eternal rhythm, rising and falling with a patience that mocked human ambition. The wind whispered through the cracks in the stone, carrying the stories of the past into the present. The house stood as a silent monument to a life that had burned with such intensity and ended so quietly. The memory of the emperor faded slowly, like the last light of day disappearing behind the western hills. The island remained steadfast and unchanging, holding the secret of the man who had tried to conquer the world. The years passed, and the house became a place of pilgrimage for those who sought to understand his final days. The legacy of his laws and his wars remained, but the man himself was gone, lost to the mist and the sea. The silence of the room was a testament to the finality of death and the passage of time. The candle burned down to a small pool of wax, marking the end of another long day on the island. The night fell slowly, wrapping the house in a blanket of darkness and stillness. The stars appeared above, indifferent to the history that had unfolded on the earth below. The island slept, and the memory of the emperor rested within its quiet, rocky heart. The text on the page spoke of laws that had governed millions of lives across generations. The ink was dark and clear, preserving the words of a man who had once commanded armies. A single feather pen lay beside the book, ready for a scholar to make notes. The silence of the room honored the weight of history contained within the small volume. The legacy of Napoleon Bonaparte remains a subject of enduring fascination for historians and the general public. His life story serves as a reminder of the power of human ambition, and the paintings I left behind found their true voice only after my silence fell, carried forward by the steady hands of those who understood their weight. My sister-in-law Johanna gathered the scattered canvases from the damp attic where they had slept for years, smelling of dust and dried paint. She spoke of them not as the work of a madman, but as the honest record of a man who saw the world with a terrifying clarity. Her letters traveled across Europe, whispering of colors that burned in skies that wept, until the art world began to listen with a slow, dawning reverence. The young painters in Paris, seeking to break the rigid rules of their academies, found in my thick, swirling strokes a permission to feel rather than just to copy. They saw the fire in the cypress trees and the golden sun in the wheat fields, and they began to paint with a similar, unbridled passion. The expressionists took my heavy brushwork and pushed it further, letting the paint itself become the emotion, while the fauves seized upon my bold, unnatural hues to shatter the quiet gray of traditional art. A single brushstroke I made in 1888, thick with cobalt blue and yellow ochre, now hangs in a museum in Amsterdam, where millions of visitors stand before it in hushed silence, tracing the ridge of dried pigment with their eyes. The influence spread like a slow tide, reaching the quiet corners of galleries in New York, Tokyo, and Berlin, where my stars still swirl above the sleeping towns I once knew. I no longer feel the cold wind of Arles or the heat of the Saint Rare, my asylum, but I sense the warmth of the light that falls upon these canvases in the quiet hours of the morning. The empire style that once demanded sharp lines and stoic faces has long since faded, replaced by a world that values the raw, unfiltered truth of a single moment. My legacy is not in the maps I drew or the battles I won, but in the way a child today might look at a sunflower and see a universe of yellow light. The world has learned to see the beauty in the broken, the strength in the trembling hand, and the profound dignity in a simple bowl of fruit. Museums now hold these works like sacred relics, preserving the memory of a life that was brief but intensely lived. The silence in these halls is different from the silence of my own rooms. It is a silence of respect, of understanding, of a shared human experience that transcends time. The paint has dried, the frame